Amazing. Welcome, everyone. We'll give another minute for a few more people to join. Okay, well, it's 12:01, so we'll get started. Thank you all so much for joining. I'm Aydin. I'm the co-founder of Destination AI Forum, which is a resource for the hospitality industry to discuss all things AI and highlight new innovation in the industry. We have an annual conference, which is every September in Washington, D.C. And this year's conference will be September 29th and 30th. So just for joining our first virtual session, we wanted to offer you all a discount. So you can register here with the QR code and use this discount through next Friday. And we'll also send it out at the end. But this will be our third annual conference and we'll be expanding to 2 days this year. So it'll be great and hope you all can come. Today is our first official virtual session, which will be launching on different topics throughout the year leading up to the conference. And today, what you can expect is an hour of content. So we'll do a session from 12 to 12:30 on how AI channels will drive hotel revenue and specifically direct revenue. And then from 12:30 to 1, we'll go deeper into what payments and booking will look like and legal components as well. And then we'll do 30 minutes of Q&A at the end. So all the speakers will be back to answer questions, and you can send questions in the chat throughout the full hour, and then we'll address as many as we can at the end. And then before we get started, just wanted to shout out our sponsor, Agentic Hospitality, and Brad Brewer, who's the founder and CEO, will be on the first session. So you will hear from him very soon. And I'll pass it over to Michael, who will be moderating our first session. And also just wanted to give him a quick shout out because his book Invisible went live on Amazon last night. And he can tell you a little bit about it too. And I'll pass it over to Michael.
Oh, yes. Well, thank you, Naz. So the book is all about, and what we're talking about today in terms of how people find hotels, how people search and using not just Google, but also these chat engines, and how do you make sure that your hotel, your business actually shows up in the results. That's what the book's all about. But enough about me. We could talk about me all day. Let's talk about the panelists that we have today in the first session. Number one, we have Harriet Brown, Chief Product Officer of Mobi AI. We have Brad Brewer, who Naz was just talking about, Chief AI Officer of Agentic Hospitality. We have Mike Mahar, SVP, Head of Commercial Technology, Loyalty, Digital Products, and AI at Wyndham Resorts, Wyndham Hotel and Resorts, and Jason Cincotta, Founder and CEO of Kismet. So now let's get to it because we have a lot to cover today, and we're going to keep everybody on track. We're going to start with Mike. There's a big shift happening today. And as I talked about in my book, discovery has changed. So in the last 6 to 12 months, what do you think is the biggest change that we've seen, that you've seen in how guests discover hotels?
Yeah, such a great question, Michael. First, thanks for moderating, and Naz, thank you so much for organizing. The topic is on point. We're in a transformational moment that's can only be compared to the invention of PCs, internet.com, and we've gone beyond, especially over the last 6 months, beyond this idea of something is going to happen to out of pilot and into production. Over the last 3 months, we've seen some brands get connected through MCP. We've heard of additional
And
new.
when you say MCP, Mike, again, because we have some people in the audience that may not know what that is. When you say MCP, what is that?
Oh, Model Context Protocol. Thank you, Michael. So think of MCP as this. It's your USB cable that you can plug from your data into an LLM. So when an LLM needs to access your hotel rates and inventory data, they're able to do that through MCP. So it gives us that
Right.
direct way to feed that data into the LLM.
All right.
And,
Thank
and
you.
now, we're hearing more on agentic AI and agentic capabilities that's going to allow us to bring transactions into the LLM, but still transacted by the brand. And that opens up a whole new way of driving some direct contribution. So exciting.
It's exciting. So then at an enterprise scale, where do you see the earliest impact of this technology?
Yeah, what I'll do, Michael, so I'll use some past success as our litmus test. So Wyndham went live with Wyndham Connect with Canary. That was our LLM supporting our guests from the time they create a reservation till the time they check out, driving upsell, ancillary revenue for hotels. And then last year we went live with Wyndham Connect Plus, where we also introduced voice and some agentic AI, being able to create and complete tasks on behalf of the guests, like modify a reservation, book a reservation, etc. And we've seen some really positive results. Customer satisfaction, hundreds of basis points up. Voice direct contribution, hundreds of basis points up. Loyalty enrollments, hundreds of basis points up. And so all of these positive signals really point to where this is going to go. And as we bring these capabilities into public LLMs like ChatGPT, Anthropic Claude, and Gemini, it's only going to grow from there. So I think the path forward is really based off of the maturity and evolution of how we're leveraging these direct connects via MCP or otherwise, and then the enriched commercial capabilities we add on top that really drive that guest engagement and value.
All right, terrific. Thank you, Mike. So now that we've kind of seen where we've been, we're going to see how bookings will change soon, from guidance to essentially execution. So Brad, I have a question for you. So over the next 18 to 36 months, does AI remain primarily a guidance layer, or does it become an execution layer that books? What do you think about that?
That's a great question. We have to think about how long we've been in this new surface of AI surface. We've been here for about 2.5 years now. Think about the mobile evolution. It took 5 years for hotels to really participate in the mobile movement. So being 2.5 years into the AI shift, we still see a 36-month evolution. I don't believe customers are ready today. Customers are in the AI surfaces and they're doing their research. They're doing their price comparison shopping. They're learning about new destinations. They can tie that in with their own personal history. They can tie in personalization. So a user on Apple phone and Siri that's going to be connected to Gemini soon is going to be able to pull up all of an intelligent travel profile and travel history. So it's going to unlock a lot of new opportunity, but it's very new. Customers don't know how to prompt and engage in these surfaces yet. So what we have today is learning and discovery. We see the next 12 to 24 months being more of an execution layer. You're building your itinerary. You're actually composing a cart in these infrastructures. And then by the time we get 36 months out, we're fully engaged in agent to agent booking, where unmanaged business travel can be booked completely without talking to a hotel or event planner. They just put out their profile of, I need 50 rooms, I need 5 boardrooms, meeting rooms, and send out and broadcast. And whichever properties are receiving that through the new format is who's going to win. And that's the big opportunity. But we see a 36-month rollout of that.
All right, thanks, Brad. So Jason, so what Brad just explained there about this future of A to A coming. So what does a hotel need to have in place right now before this AI to booking is even plausible?
Yeah, no, and I'm excited about that future. My co-founders are a real kind of AI true believer, and he believes that we're just going to have, agents roaming the internet making decisions for us. Um, the opportunity is to change how a guest plans travel by being at the point of inspiration. And I think that my speculation is that the companies building ChatGPT and OpenAI and AI mode and Gemini and Claude, they want to create cohesive experiences in that chat context. So the opportunity for hotels is to put your content into someone else's UI. And this is like a brand new problem. Historically, hoteliers have relied on Expedia or Booking to, get a pipe with their information in it, and they've maybe done a listing in, Google's Hotel Center. But to really give a branded experience and your own content into someone else's surface is a incredibly technical problem, and it's one that is solvable, but it requires you to start investing in organizing your content in a way that it can be transported. And, I don't want to put any money in the three-letter acronym swear jar and say MCP, but there's a lot of different there's a lot of different ways that you can get information into someone else's surface. And it's not just direct feeds like MCP. It's also about what you're hosting from your own website, how you organize it, and how you share it. And increasingly, the technical aspects of how you build your web presence will govern how AI is able to find and show information about your hotel. So I do think that it's a brand new problem, and it's very different than perhaps the old SEO problem or organizing for a guest on your website was in the past.
All right. Thanks, Jason. Now, Harriet. So Jason kind of talked about what hotels need to do to kind of have this new UI to be visible. So what do you see as the biggest blocker to mainstream AI to booking at brand scale?
So 2 weeks ago, I would have said that the biggest blocker was the number of big unknowns about how agentic bookings were going to be done in ChatGPT. But with OpenAI's announcement that they're now going to expose commerce inside of apps, I think that the answer is much, much clearer. Now that we know how OpenAI wants to enable commerce, like we know who the merchant of record is going to be, and that's the owner of the app. And based on recent conversations that I've had, merchant service providers like WorldPay or Stripe, they have the tech in place to actually start processing agentic transactions. So now I would say that the biggest barrier is hotels launching apps, the discoverability of those apps, and consumer education. But I really do believe that as soon as users can buy directly within the hotel's ChatGPT app, more bookings are going to happen because the friction of clicking out to the website will be eliminated.
Okay, great. And now we're going to shift to sort of capturing direct revenue, which you just talked about, and what hotel leaders should do now. You talked about apps. So let's stick with you, Harriet, for a moment. In an AI discovery world, what is the most important thing hotel leaders should be doing now to win the direct, and what impacts those impacts will produce, investments will produce?
So I would say the most important thing is to get your MCP solution in place quickly. That's what these apps are built on top of is MCP, which again is Model Context Protocol. If we can bring up the Mobi and Wyndham case study slide, you can see the difference in the output when you have an MCP solution connected into the LLM is really substantial. So without one, the LLM is going to show web results about your properties from multiple sources that aren't yours. They're even going to recommend booking with an OTA. With an MCP solution in place, it shows your first-party data, real-time inventory and pricing, and direct hotel booking links. This can be even more immersive with the app UX surface that's possible on top of MCP. And with an intelligent MCP solution, you can get really good results just using the existing public website APIs that you already have and be up and running in about 6 weeks. And the reward of doing that quickly is going to be more direct bookings.
Okay, thank you. And Mike, how do you balance scale and experimentation? What gets standardized centrally, and what gets piloted, and what gets blocked?
Yeah, I wish we had a crystal ball, Michael, and we could do what we normally do in determining, where to invest. But I think the best approach now is to widen your net a little bit, make some low cost bets across this ecosystem, and start experimenting now and don't wait. And I think Harriet captured it really well when we went live with Mobi with our MCP connecting to Anthropic Claude. The experience to start is a little rudimentary. It's very text focused, but it does allow you to interact with the hotel data, and that starts to open up imagination, and you start to realize really quickly how powerful it can be. When we go live with our app experience, which is, we're only weeks away, you're going to have a more digitalized experience. You'll have a graphical interface. You'll be able to scroll through inventory. You can, click in through a map, and these types of capabilities that grow is through experimentation. It's through connecting early. And so to get to your question, I think it's a combination of a few things. You need to have visibility. So continuing to build up capabilities from the SEO to GEO, kind of shift is important. We are actually a few months away from launching our new e-commerce platform, both app and web. It's going to be very much merchandised for better LLM exposure. And so we know that's a great way to get more visibility. We're connecting early. That's a great way to experiment and get visibility. And it's just continuing to build upon that, because it's those early days where you learn the most. Well, the traffic and sophistication is still fairly low. As that matures, you're ahead of it. You're able to create a continuous feedback loop where you can apply changes fast through insights. But you've got to get in the door to be able to do that. So that's the way I would think of it, Michael.
Okay.
And then just continue to evolve from there.
Okay. And just a question I got the other day is if you connect an app, does that make you instantly visible, or like on the chat, like on ChatGPT or Gemini, just by adding an app? It's
Yeah,
not, right? It's not
it does
connected.
not. Yeah, it does not. It's more like Alexa skills, where you go in and you enable the skill. The same applies here. I think with OpenAI, they will, now that they've leaned in on apps, you're going to see the experiments that they were doing a few weeks ago on scanning their marketplace and then matching to various apps to provide a result will continue to mature. But then you're going to rely on partners in the middle as MCP aggregators, where they're producing some inventory on your behalf for an unbranded search. As that continues to mature, and then of course GEO, that's an evolution of SEO. So I think it's a combination of a few things. But great question.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, now we're going to shift to a couple of examples and enterprise signals. So we're going to go with Jason. So Jason, could you share an example of a visibility gap that caused a hotel to disappear in AI answers, and what fixed it?
Yeah. So I guess we all brought pictures of our apps. And then I think this dovetails exactly with the last question you brought up, Michael, and one that I saw pop up in the comment section of, do we think people are going to download the apps? And the question on visibility is a good one. How do you get found in the first place? How do you make sure that you win the right to be shown in someone else's surface? And I think that this is actually an incredibly technical problem, but one that's really exciting. What we see on screen is us working, basically since October to lay the groundwork for ChatGPT to suggest and choose to use an app that we had installed. Conversation before we get here just started with, I'm thinking about planning a trip to Napa Valley and I want to golf. And, making sure that, chat was willing to talk about, our client was really important. And we could look at signals, look at actual training data against organization of certain content that we had done to bridge this visibility gap. And then when I said, Silverado looks good, it's amazing to me how the dynamic layer becomes so important. So it's about the transition, closing the gap so that you can be found, and then letting the LLM take over. And it will pass information like, I had been talking about golf, the dates I had been considering. And that's what allows you to give a different experience in this service. And so I brought this picture along because I think it talks about how it's layering of work over months to make sure that you're visible, that when you're visible, it can get to your specific app that you're trying to put into this surface, and that then you have the content that you can serve up because you're getting contextual clues and very detailed information about what a specific guest is looking for. And that's what we think of when we kind of talk about how you're going to close the gap and transform the planning and booking experience for guests.
Okay, great. Brad, so similar question for you. Could you share an example of a legacy discovery or distribution workflow that becomes obsolete as AI intermediates the journey, and what replaces it?
Yeah, Naz, if you could pull my slide up again, we'll talk about sort of the anatomy of chat result page and the shift that's happening. Michael and Jason both touched on, hotels need to bridge the gap today of getting your system connected to an AI agent. You need to get your content, your availability, your pricing, amenities, map, reviews, and all content on there. Looking at how ChatGPT is going to surface this, there are 5 different opportunities to drive traffic from ChatGPT's surface. We have focused today on MCP, the Model Context Protocol, and connecting an app. But look below the app, its listings, its citations, its sources. We know that revenue is coming today through those 3 channels that any hotel can be in. As Michael or as Jason had pointed out, SEO on your own website asset can drive visibility into citations and sources. And we see brands, even just boutique properties generating 3 to 5K a month through those 3 links. And we see our large chains, multi-location chains, generating run rates of multiple millions of dollars through those 3 channels today, not through apps, not through ads, through just having good SEO out there. And Michael, you touched on it with Wyndham Hotel Group. You're already seeing that revenue come through the Claude MCP. When you guys launch that into ChatGPT, it's going to be explosive. And the brands that get out there and take advantage of it today are they're going to be the winners, right? Once that evolution kicks in, the brands that already understand the conversation and the questions, they're going to win.
All right, so Brad, just to follow up, because you talked about brands, what about the independents, the boutique hotels? Do they not, what happens to them?
Yeah, no, that's the best opportunity. I actually think the independent hotelier or the boutique brand has the best opportunity to win inside of AI surfaces. It's personalization. Each user that goes into this surface is going to get personalized results back. And the 3-4 results that they get back, they click on. They're influenced by those answers that come to them. So it's going to be about getting your independent property out there. And there are tools and solutions out there that can help independents bridge that gap from their CRS or PMS to property management software or central reservation software, get that availability rate and inventory out into these systems. And they can connect with partners that offer that. And there are a few on this call. I think all of us are able to deliver that to the independents.
Okay, Mike's got a question.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that. Data is king in this scenario. So being able to bring more accurate data to the LLMs about our hotels, the amenities, the area, the specific attributes of the room in a way that we've never done across GDS channels and OTAs, et cetera, before. I think it's going to allow this sophistication to grow. And it's going to be an incredible experience for a traveler to be able to search for things that they want to see in a room that they've never been able to search for before, and being able to match inventory to searches like that is really where this becomes absolutely incredible.
All right, and Jason has his hand up. So Jason wants to pile on. Go ahead.
If data's king, the answer is it's got to be quality. It can't be agentic slop. And so if somebody's selling you a solution where let's generate a bunch of blog posts about your property, and it's never going to work. Actually, the LLMs are too smart to fall for that. It's about the hard work of explaining exactly what's special about your property, organizing it, and serving it up in a way that the LLMs can get to. You're not going to trick it. This isn't, the disconnect between your photos and what you're actually serving will hurt you in the long run. So it's time to be honest is what I'd add to that.
All right, so Jason, to that point, I had this conversation yesterday. You have a hotel, and they want to convey a certain feeling, so they have marketing language about this is a very experiential language, but AI doesn't like that. To your point, they like it to be very specific. So how do you balance, your website that is for people and also for these AI agents?
You serve different content, and I don't mean in terms of cloaking or the old stuff that used to get you in trouble in SEO. But for instance, when we generate descriptions of photos, because at runtime or in a chat, the LLM is not going to open up its vision pipeline and watch your photo. We don't let the hotel go and edit those descriptions. They'll just change it to say it's an urban oasis on the roof. And that means nothing when it comes to semantic search or actual useful data. You need factual information. You need an ingestion pipeline that organizes your data and serves up real things that are factual, location data, use Google Places IDs, map your world, be honest about it, surface the right reviews. But this is not a time to get creative with your generative experience. Marketing is not going to fly. LLM doesn't care about your brand at the end of the day. I hate to say it, but it's important for you to be honest about what you're offering.
Okay, great. Now we're going to be shifting to the end of the first portion of today's seminar. virtual meeting. So now I'm going to ask each of the panelists a 30-second question, and then I'm going to kick it off to part two with Ira. So we'll start with Mike. So Mike, what is the single biggest blind spot hotel executives have right now about AI-driven discovery and direct revenue capture? 30 seconds.
Sit and wait. I hear way too often that I'm going to take a sit and wait approach and see how it goes. I think it's no longer a question of should I do something with AI to capture this share and drive more direct contribution. It's a question of those that do are going to win the race, and those that don't are going to get left behind.
Okay, Brad.
Yeah, I would say the single biggest blind spot for hospitality executives is believing the website is the center of the digital strategy. Today, AI does not browse website, it assembles answers. And to drive direct revenue, it depends on structured data readiness today, not SEO ranking.
Okay, there you go. And Jason?
Don't pass a page to an LLM and ask you what's on it and assume that makes you visible. In the actual search process of assembling options, its token budget is stretched very thin. And so just because if you pass a single link and say, read it back to me, it can tell you facts about your hotels, does not mean your hotel is visible in AI search.
Okay, and Harriet, I'll let you have the last word.
I think a big blind spot is when I've talked to hotel executives about standing up an MCP solution and they say like, oh, that's easy. I can just flip a switch and turn it on. I've just got to wrap my website APIs. That's not true. An MCP solution is an AI solution in itself. And ultimately, the quality of that solution is going to influence the amount of traffic that the LLM drives to it. Just as Jason was saying before, LLMs are not dumb, they're smart, and they know the difference between what's good and what's not.
Okay, terrific. Well, thank you, everybody. And now I'm going to introduce the moderator for the second portion. So, and then everyone who's watching this, when the second portion is done, everyone's going to come back on and we're going to be answering questions because I can see right now through the chat, there are a lot of questions. So anyway, I have the honor and the privilege to introduce Ira Vouk, hospitality consultant, published author, SDSU professor. Check out Ira's new online training on AI search optimization, AEO, GEO on her LinkedIn profile. And I now hand it off to Ira.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, everybody. That was an amazing session, super informative. And so my panelists, please turn on your cameras and your microphones. Also, before we begin, I just wanted to let the audience know, if you do have a question, there is a separate Q&A section in your Zoom window. It will be easier for us if you just add your question there. And then we will try not to miss the ones that you've already posted in the chat, but going forward, just post them in the Q&A. We will have the last 30 minutes of the event, which is 30 minutes from now. We will be addressing your questions, and this is going to be our Q&A session part of the event. So I just wanted to mention that. And Michael Goldrich, if you could monitor the chat for me during my session, because I'm probably not going to be able to see the questions. I'll be too engaged in the wonderful conversation we're about to have. And I have my amazing panelists with me here, Andrew Beckmann with Stripe. Okay, great. Yes, I was going to look at the slide, but okay, thanks. I also have my cheat sheet here. Sorry Thanks. about that. No worries. Andrew Beckmann with Stripe, Travel and Hospitality Lead. Sanjay Vakil, co-founder of DirectBooker and CEO. Greg Duff with Foster and Garvey, Principal and Chair of Hospitality, Travel and Tourism Practice. And Tyrone Millard with OpenAI, GTM and Large in Enterprise. And today, during this part of our event, during the next 30 minutes, we're going to be discussing how the way that direct bookings, or not just direct bookings, in the hotel world are being transformed through AI right now. How is that affecting the payment rails, the identity, the data control, the privacy compliance? So I would say super critical, super hot topic
very complex topic. I don't know a single person who would say that they're experts on this, but we're going to try to uncover some of those things today. And I have amazing panelists who have expertise in different parts of it. Before we begin the conversation, I think what would help frame it a little bit, Naz, if you could pull up the slide, that the infographic that I have here. So I think it's important to understand that when we say AI bookings or agentic bookings, different people mean different things. And we can identify at least 3 different scenarios that are drastically different from kind of the basic level, let's call it AI assisted booking, as you're seeing on the screen, where a traveler just uses a consumer AI platform like Gemini and ChatGPT, looks up a few hotels, picks from one of the recommended properties and books likely outside of the chat window. So that's scenario number 1, which is also transforming our industry, the distribution space in our industry. Scenario number 2, let's call it AI mediated booking, a very different scenario with AI in the picture, but let's say within a chatbot on a hotel's website or an OTA website for that matter. In the hotel's own website scenario, the hotel company is controlling the environment, a whole different scenario, right? Also, AI participates in the picture and AI interacts with the user. Scenario number 3 is the most complex situation where there is a full automated AI executed A2A flow with human not even participating, really. Like the human doesn't really even, may not even trigger the conversation because AI might see that there was a meeting booked in a different city. It knows that it needs to go and book the reservation. The agent goes and negotiates and interacts with a hotel agent. The reservation magically appears in the inbox. So this is number 3 scenario, which is the most complex and requires the most, I would say, the most comprehensive approach to all the things that we're going to be discussing today. So I think, Naz, you can probably stop sharing the screen. I don't think we need the intro slide. I just wanted to see your beautiful faces. So in light of what, these 3 different levels of AI engagement in the picture, when AI becomes the primary interface between the consumer and the hotel property or hotel company on a very high level, what is that fundamental? What are the fundamental changes that occur from your perspective when that becomes the primary channel for communication and primary channel of bookings? We don't have a specific order here. Whoever wants to go first, please. Let's start the conversation. What is the fundamental change that you're seeing happening?
So I'll offer up a perspective here, Ira.
Of course.
I think that from my standpoint, having used these tools pretty much exclusively now for the last 9 months for my own travel, I've gotten away from looking at a giant list of hotels, of which a very small fraction of those are actually relevant to the question I'm asking. So I just came back from a conference in Berlin, and I had a set of constraints around that trip. I needed to be on a particular stop in Berlin, but when you start those conversations on search today, you end up with a list of 300 hotels paginated across 20 pages. Mm-hmm. It's a clumsy experience, and you end up hitting filters and looking at maps trying to figure out where you're supposed to go. What's changing is that, and at the end of it, you end up with a handful of hotels, which are probably the right candidate set for you to go do more research on.
Probably is the key word here.
Probably. What I'm finding is that I am getting down to that candidate list far more efficiently with AI. Partly because I'm able to hand in the constraints that matter to me in natural language, partly because the constraints are ones that the AI is really good at helping narrow down the set to. And it comes back with a half dozen, and they're really, really good. And at that point, I sort of dig in deeper. But that first, knockdown is very, very efficient.
AI doing the Googling for you, that part.
The Googling and the shortlisting, right? Here's a set of hotels that satisfy my constraints.
Intelligent shortlisting. Okay, Andrew, you can unmute yourself, and Sanjay also. You can keep your microphones on during the conversation. Okay, Tyrone or Greg, do you have, or Andrew?
I would just say, I echo, what Sanjay said. I've also, as a self-proclaimed travel nerd, have been trying to do all of my travel search exclusively. And I would say plus one to what Sanjay said, but what's also interesting is how helpful it is to curate a total trip experience. So thinking about hotel, but also, I was, if I'm going to the conference in Berlin, like, yes, I want a hotel that satisfies X, Y, and Z, but how do I incorporate the experiences and the places to have meetings, et cetera? Like, it's really an efficient tool to do all of that in one spot, which I think makes it a bit more sticky for someone like me, in addition to what Sanjay rightly pointed out.
Awesome.
Actually, I just want to double click on that because I think a lot of like what we're trying to build at OpenAI is adding in that personalization aspect of like satisfying the things that I'm looking for. That is not always easy, just kind of getting that from a Google search. So I think as we start to pick out particular preferences, like just what Andrew and Sanjay just called out, the example that we always like to use internally here is the curved shower rail inside a shower, specifically finding a hotel that has that versus something else. And that's like really hard to actually like nail down if that is a preference that I want to have in a hotel that I'm booking for. That then ties to things that I'm looking for as well, like that surround that hotel, like meeting places, restaurants, etc. But providing like an actual conversational platform to be able to do that, to ask it questions about does this do this, is so different to what we've been used to so far in travel, just generally.
Sanjay
Tyrone,
called
Tyrone,
it
can I?
infrequently asked questions. That's what you call
Yeah,
it, right, Sanjay?
infrequently asked questions. Tyrone, I love that partly because we had an investor who came to me and used our product, and it turns out he doesn't just want it to be a curved shower curtain. He detests shower curtains as a very concept. And so he was like, I want it to be a rail, a glass thing that I can open. He was searching aggressively for a hotel room without a shower curtain. And the fact that showers are such a important part of people's hotel experience is sort of fascinating to me in and of itself.
I had no idea, I'll be honest, until that curved shower curtain thing became an example that we use so frequently.
And
The other thing, Eric, can I add one more thing that I think is
yeah, but
actually
quickly, my dear, quickly, we need to move on. Yes.
when you go to Google, Google has talked about the fact publicly that people typically visit 40 or more web pages before they select a hotel. One of the things that I think is completely undervalued, and as we switch over to using AI, is that all of that conversation, instead of happening over 40 different web pages, is happening in one UI and providing context in one UI. And that's such an incredible opportunity for us to identify what's perfect for that user because we finally have it in one place.
That's actually a great transition to our next question. We're talking about payments. You mentioned one UI. I would not agree with that because in most cases right now, the user is forced to click out of the chat bot to actually complete the transaction. So now, as we're talking about payment rails here, and the question would be the first question for Andrew, in the AI native payment architecture.
Yep.
How are things different? And also maybe keeping in mind these three scenarios that I mentioned in the beginning, it's probably the most complex in the full A2A.
Yeah.
What is changing from your perspective?
Yeah, I think so. If we look at, and again, I'm going to very much simplify this, but payments in traditional e-com currently, would typically involve a traveler, booker, or customer, going to the merchant, putting in their credit card details, and it's really a hit. The human is making those buying decisions, and this is all obviously shifting. We cannot just copy and paste that and hand that to an agent because you can imagine all of the risks with fraud and liability and the agent going rogue and booking way more than it should. So there's definitely some fundamentals that are changing in kind of payment architecture, if you will. The way we're solving it is I think of it as kind of a two-piece equation that are going to be the fundamentals that will likely evolve and tweak as we think about those scenarios that you detailed, Ira, and wherever else agentic commerce may go. And one part of that is really doubling down on a protocol, and there are a couple out there. A protocol that would give an agent permission to do purchasing on a user's behalf. We have one that we co-developed with OpenAI called the Agentic Commerce Protocol. Google's got one called Universal Commerce Protocol. All open source. We're all planning to work together there.
And that's great because it gives the agent the permission, but then you need something to actually execute the payment. And that is where you're finding some new things happen. So we have what we call a shared payment token, which basically is meant to address that risk of an agent going rogue by, it is a one-time use token that is spun up when the, transaction is enacted, that has very specific criteria and guardrails around it in terms of the amount it can spend, the time that it's viable for, the merchant that it can actually use this with. And it does all of that without exposing any sensitive credentials, which again help mitigate that risk. So thinking about like a protocol environment that helps just, start giving those agents permissions, and then the token to really enable said transaction are kind of the two pieces that feel newer in this equation, and I imagine will be kind of the building blocks to how we think about payments in this new world.
Amazing. So Tyrone, and again, super happy that you've joined today, because we've been busy discussing things from our perspective here, the hotelier's perspective and the tech vendor's perspective, but we haven't really heard from AI, like the perspective of actual AI platforms, the partners that are becoming very important partners and stakeholders in our new distribution ecosystem, right? So from the perspective of an AI platform, AI company like OpenAI, what are the requirements for this trusted, safe, reliable transaction for, let's say, something like a hotel booking?
So super transparently, I don't know that I could add much more to what Andrew just said, because candidly, he just kind of answered that. What I would say is I'd take a step back and do something a little bit more high level in terms of how I would answer it, which is I think there's certainly a lot of thought that needs to happen around the trust and liability aspect that Andrew brought up, right? Because candidly, I think agents are great until you actually need a human in the loop. So there is still a requirement to have, at some point, I would imagine, folks step in to say like, I'm ready for you to book that for me now, unless there are actual kind of like trusted guardrails built in that I've approved this particular travel agent AI bot that I've built, or via ACP to like go and actually transact on that. I think candidly, I think the biggest thing that we have to start to think about here is like the operational correctness piece of it, which is how do we actually tie that into the interface that I'm working in, which is, as an example, ChatGPT, that then takes you through to that location that I'm booking at, that payment and those transactional like pieces that need to actually happen under the hood actually do end up landing, within the property that's actually running this particular transaction. So like there's a lot that's there. And I think there's also a little bit to be thought about here, how we work on the attach piece of an end-to-end like booking. And do we want to incorporate like our partners? Do we want to incorporate other things that tie into these particular transactions? So I think there's a lot to think about here, but candidly, I think Andrew's probably better placed to actually answer that than I would at this point.
Thank you for your contribution. And also, you probably heard us discussing in the first session the announcement that was made by OpenAI in terms of scaling back the efforts of integrating transactions within chatbot, not necessarily specifically related to our industry. It wasn't really, our industry wasn't specifically mentioned, but we kind of assumed that it falls under that overall effort. Is it something that you can comment on? Like, is that related to this lack of reliable way of implementing these transactions from the security perspective, or anything that you could disclose on that topic?
Yeah, from that perspective, I think we're still very focused on the conversational discovery aspect piece of this still. Like we're working really hard to ensure that is a an incredible experience for consumers who then can transparently book that from within ChatGPT without ever having to leave our interface, but also at the same time understanding the intent of what that customer is trying to do and getting them to that point where it's a little bit more personalized. So like we talked about the conversational discovery aspect around like restaurants, meeting rooms, coffee, etc. But there's, right now, I think there's still a challenge for us to see that the inventory is still grounded in like actually seeing like what it is that user's trying to get a hold of, but also at the same time understanding what the contextual handoff piece needs to be and how we actually handle that correctly. So I think there's still some aspects here that we're still working through because it's still very early in this world, I think for everybody, even for us as we're working through this. But at this point, I think we're going to be focusing more now on the conversational discovery aspect of this.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, so let's move on to the discussion around identity, which seems like it's currently kind of the missing layer in AI bookings, or at least I think we haven't given it enough of our attention. Greg, the first question to you, this is kind of really like your waters. As AI start transacting on behalf of users. What happens to, like, what are new risks and exposures that appear in your area around consent, identity verification of the consumer, and in that aspect?
Question. So, if you look at it from a purely regulatory perspective, there's not a lot to talk about. I think we're probably all aware of the EU efforts and their AI Act. We know that various states, there's a handful of states that have actually passed comprehensive AI statutes or regulations. Most of these frameworks do a risk-based analysis as to where and how these regulations apply. If you take that kind of classification analysis and apply it to lodging and hospitality transactions, rarely does anything that we're talking about rise to the level to trigger applications of that. Where we are seeing regulation, obviously, which many of us are probably familiar with around surveillance pricing and issues around that, we're seeing a lot of developments in the privacy space. So states that are unable to pass AI-specific regulations or statutes are doing it via privacy statutes and regulations. But then we have the big overhang of the administration's executive order, which has attempted to quash any state level efforts in this space. We expect to see later this month or next month whether or not the administration follows through on its threats to actually go after states who are attempting to regulate in this space. That has been part of that executive order. What I would say, though, aside from regulations, and I don't want to dismiss the significance of that, but today, practically, there's not much to worry about there. What I would focus everyone on is going back to very basic principles of contract law and agency law. Do we have the elements necessary to create a binding contract? In this case, it's the room reservation. And how do we get to that? Who is making the offer? Who is accepting? Is the person who's making the offer and accepting the offer, are they legally able to do so, which then triggers issues around agency? And so from a purely legal perspective, looking at these transactions, notwithstanding the fact that we're talking about cutting edge technology, from a legal perspective, it forces us to go back to very basic legal principles around contract creation and then agency. So in that regard, not a lot has changed.
Can I ask a question there? The GDSs for a long time have sort of, really going back to basic principles in travel,
Yes.
have done these things where they will take a reservation on behalf of a consumer. There may not be a credit card associated. There may just be a name associated with it, and that hotel is held on to that room until, say, 6 p.m. Is that different than what we're seeing today, or is it when money starts to trade hands that it changes in some meaningful manner?
Ziki, a short answer is it's not changing a lot. It's not necessary to have an exchange of money in your example. A promise to pay can be sufficient consideration for creating the contract. But your comment is a good one, because I've had countless conversations with our clients thinking through the application and implementation of AI. And there are a lot of analogies to be drawn back to good old days of GDS bookings and how it is that booking is created and who's responsible for filling it. And if that reservation does not occur, then who has responsibility? It's sort of gone in waves. We had, the GDS world, which dates all of us to talk about GDS, but then it's no different than in considering OTAs and third-party intermediaries, and now adding AI on top of it. It doesn't change a lot some of the basic principles that we had years ago.
And Sanjay, this is actually that ties very well into the question that I was going to ask you. When there is an intermediary, and you mentioned GDS, right? But now we have a new layer that we're introducing, AI layer, and then there are aggregators like DirectBooker, especially. How do we ensure that the digital identity travels through this multi-step process from the consumer to the hotel, which then also ties into the data of who controls that information? What is your take on that?
It's a fantastic question, and my hope is to stay as clear of it as I possibly can, right? So I think that, Tyrone and the team at OpenAI is going to build over time, a fairly sophisticated representation of this user. We really only need a very small projection of that to complete a hotel transaction. And I think that in the fullness of time, that will be an object that's handed through, which is quite frankly opaque. to intermediaries, where what is necessary to complete the transaction in terms of digital identity is wrapped up into something that only the hotel, in the case of a direct booking, can unpack to complete the transaction. All of this stuff is technology that's relatively straightforward, and we've implemented it at various times in various ways on the payment side, where you can hand in, an opaque token that I can't see as somebody who's handing it through, but can be unpacked on the other side. I want to use the word crypto, but that refers to a particular domain. But the old world of crypto did this very well with public and private keys. And so I think we can, and I'm going to assume that people are working on this, have the intermediaries stay as pass-throughs and not monkey with the identity beyond perhaps decorating with it with something that they think is valuable to the user. Oh, they might need an early check-in, right? But that's not tied to the user. That's tied to the transaction itself.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I'd like to stay clear of it, honestly.
Interesting. Tyrone, are you seeing it the same way, or is your perspective different?
Yeah, no, I think it comes down to everything that's. I actually kind of agree with Sanjay. I think a lot of what we're trying to figure out is consent aspect of this, and like what like the authentication models need to look like as we're collecting or understanding who that user is and what they're trying to do. And then from there, it's, the next stage of that is trying to understand the orchestration layer, which is like, what are they trying to achieve? How do we get them there within contextual relevance to get them closer to that result, and then start to open up other potential experiences. But I think it comes down to, for me, it comes down to essentially like, privacy and consent, and then kind of the governance wrapped around it as to how we get there.
Yeah, I think we've been discussing a lot in our industry also how do we find the balance between collecting enough from a hotel perspective, collecting enough information from the consumer to be able to provide personalized, amazing customer service. For example, to know that this person is coming with a family and they need a Legoland package, whether this is a business traveler who needs, fast Wi-Fi and, a desk in the room. So a balance between collecting enough to provide great customer service, but not collecting too much to violate their privacy. So how do we find that balance? And maybe Tyrone, if you have an opinion, and also anybody else, if you guys can jump in. I think that's a very hot topic that we're also trying to wrap our heads around.
Yeah, I think first, with somebody who spends significant money on Lego, I would love to understand how I get better tickets to Legoland. I think the key thing here is like there's levels of personalization that I think that makes sense when it comes to travel, especially within my own individual like ChatGPT like profile. So even if I have ChatGPT, you can personalize that to tell the tool like exactly the things that I'm enjoying and the things and that influences actually intent.
I share too much with mine, but how do we communicate that to the hotel?
And that's part of the challenge is like how do we start to get to that point? And I think that comes down to consent and offering that user an option to consent to giving that information or that personalized data away. I think there's also an aspect here around like what do the authentication models need to look like and how does that look on the other end? So how does the hotel like understand, and is there a data sharing aspect of that needs to happen, and how does that actually happen in real practical reality? I don't know that I have a great answer other than saying like it comes down to user consent and what is it that users open to be doing.
Can I?
Go ahead, Andrew, and then
I was going to say just two quick thoughts. One is I think in the short term too, it ties to what you were showing on your kind of framework era. Like some of it right now is just understanding that like you can share more data. Obviously, you can be much more personalized for agentic commerce experiences on brand.com websites. So like a Bonvoy app can integrate with loyalty, and then think of the third parties like the OpenAIs right now just as an acquisition channel. And I think you kind of testing and learning in those environments will inform. This is also an area where payments can help solve some of that gap. Like, Stripe, we have a digital wallet called Link, and, Link is something that, 200 million people are using, and you might have signed up for Link when you bought your OpenAI subscription, but imagine using Link as your payment option to book a hotel on any agentic surface. There's a lot of memory and personalization and eventually maybe loyalty and things that could be embedded within Link or any, digital wallet payment that can help stitch some of these pieces together as well. So payments can do more than maybe the transaction, but play a role in that personalization glue that we're all talking about here.
Yeah, so let me push on this a little bit. Uh, I'm struggling a little bit to find where I wouldn't want something shared with the hotel if I thought it would make my experience better, right? I think the sensitive. I've worked at a couple travel companies now. There is some sensitivity as to what hotel you're going to. There are some, clothing optional adult only resorts that perhaps you don't want showing up in your backlog, and I agree with that. But beyond that, the fact that I'd like an early check-in or the fact that I'm gluten-free, I feel like this is a relatively safe environment for a reasonable fraction of your digital identity to be handed forward to the hotel. I can think of a lot of other scenarios that could be much more problematic than the space that we're in, and I feel like I wouldn't want this to stymie the work.
So, Sanjay, can I just add? I'm sorry, I'm not. I know we're on. We need to keep close to time here, but as we're thinking about that, Sanjay, I think that's where things like loyalty programs inside hotels, and how they tie in, and how you can actually tie that as an attached to like a payment aspect that Andrew mentioned, right? And then forming that digital identity that will start to then influence how exactly I want to be shown results, or the type of results with that curved shower.
And I think it's an opportunity for property management systems and part of the core hospitality stack to also play a role in feeding into this as well.
Yeah, I would not rely on PMSs and that.
Not the only.
Whole separate discussion.
Fair.
So, Greg, this is your area of expertise. What are the legal risks associated with what we're discussing? Finding the balance between sharing too much and undersharing for personalization.
I guess at the end of the day, what I would encourage everyone to keep in mind is that whether it's a chatbot or whether it's an agent, you're responsible for it. So if it's a chatbot on your website and you're giving guests directions about how to book, where to book, what the best room or option may be for them, you, the hotelier, are ultimately responsible for what that chatbot is saying. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of reported decisions or law out there in this space. If you've not seen it yet, there's a great Air Canada case where Air Canada tried to disclaim all responsibility for their chatbot and for errors that its chatbot was making with its passengers. So there is some examples we can point to out there, but again, whether it's a chatbot or an agent or what have you, ultimately you're responsible, whether it be for privacy compliance, whether it be for transacting, whether it be for payment compliance, whatever it may be. That tool is an extension of you. Don't look at it as something being separate.
Awesome. Okay, so the no pressure, the multi-billion-dollar question to all of you, and I need to hear from each of you. Are hotels gaining or losing control with AI being in the picture in our distribution space? Go.
I'll go first. I believe they are going to gain control because they will be able to put a richer subset or maybe even superset of their information and make it available to some of these tools and be in a position to create great personalized offers by connecting directly to those consumers. And I think that every hotel can do a better job pitching itself than having some intermediary do it instead.
Sanjay, I'm going to agree with you that there is the opportunity to do that today.
That's the key word.
Yes, and we all know that there have been many opportunities through the history of lodging companies. My fear is that those that do not take advantage of that will be bypassed by certain well-financed and high-tech intermediaries that will do it for them.
I agree.
Absolutely.
I would echo that, and I would also just say, there's the opportunity. And I also think one of the other unknowns too is just what are the other agentic interfaces that, are not even in scope right now. Like right now it's the LLMs, it's, brand direct, it's social media, but there may be others that also tip the balance as well. But agree with Greg, it's to be seen. And I would hope any hotel is at least experimenting now, because otherwise we risk this not being the case.
Tyrone, what is your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everybody here. Actually, I think that it's typically it's mostly a gain here. I think the other challenge to think about is how do we actually start to think about how, I think as Andrew mentioned, how does booking change and how does it evolve over time in terms of the modes of booking that we use. So potentially, is there a voice aspect, video, etc.? Are there things that we could potentially doing and build that would allow for, a better booking experience or an easier one, just something that is not a text-based experience, or at least a chat interface, right? There are other aspects of this that are incredibly important where we just also still haven't got a clear view yet on like what does the AI to human handoff aspect of this mean, and do we have to like build guardrails around that, and different booking experiences as a part of that overall experience as well. So I think I agree with everybody here.
Amazing. So one last very quick lightning round question, 20 seconds, 30 seconds each before we move on to the Q&A section of the event. What is the single biggest blind spot hotel executives have right now in regards to the topic of our discussion?
I would just say that, that they can start now. I think some may be overwhelmed, understandably, by technology, but there's things you can do now to start experimenting and building that muscle. And, very soon you can be like the likes of Mike from Wyndham doing all the amazing work that they're doing. So start now. You can, it's not something to be afraid of.
Awesome.
I'll add that a lot of the conversation is really focused on how do I wean ourselves off OTA traffic and OTA commissions, and I think that's a very important point. I'm actually way more excited, and if I were a hotel executive, I'd be much more excited about how AI can result in happier customers, in better hospitality, in better trips, and in delighted guests. And I think that we don't spend enough time trying to figure out how to do that for across the board. I'd love to spend some time on that ultimately.
Yeah, I think as we think about opening up brand new revenue channels and channels for inventory to be displayed in front of consumers, I think the other thing to think about here is the customer support, but also customer experience aspect of this, and time to resolution of how do we get potentially a guest that may be experiencing the classic airline case of like, where's my luggage, but like how do we manage bookings and how do we get those things done? That can be done in a far more optimized, at least consolidated way for consumers to work with individual brands, but also at the same time, how do we start to delight those customers with based on their previous buying history, trends, patterns, everything that we're seeing from those users and consumers, like how do we actually then give them a better experience at our property moving forward?
Greg?
Last word, I think it's a continued lack of awareness. And what I mean by that is within these organizations, there may be pockets of knowledge or expertise or desire to move forward with one or all of the many things we've talked about today. That knowledge and awareness is not widely spread among any of these organizations. And so I think that just increasing awareness about how these tools can affect and improve enterprise-wide what they're trying to achieve would be a tremendous help.
Amazing. And this is what Destination AI and us are addressing, right? I would add one more from myself. I think we are not, as an industry, we're not paying enough attention to AEO, AI search optimization, and then transition from traditional SEO to AEO, because principles are different. Like, how do you ensure that you are part of that, the recommendation by AI, what Tyrone was mentioning, that OpenAI is now concentrating more on the discovery phase, right? How do you become part of that recommendation by AI? And I think learning about that is very critical for hotels right now, because OTAs are way ahead in their AEO strategies right now. So hotels are kind of losing ground. I think that's important to also understand. Okay, Naz, I think we're done with our session. Thank you so much, guys. This was amazing. I learned a lot, which doesn't happen very often. And I hope that our audience also learned a lot. So let's move on to the Q&A section of our event. And we already have a bunch of questions in the Q&A.
Yeah, we have a ton of questions in the Q&A, and thank you, Ira and Michael, and all the speakers. That was so interesting. I also learned a lot. So I'm excited to address some of these questions. Feel free to raise your hand and we can have you actually say your question. But I'll start with going through the chat, and I'll first start with Monica Nerger's question. Can anyone on the call speak briefly to governance and security in an agentic booking world? Anyone want to take that question? It's a tough one.
Yeah, I can take a stab at that one if you want. Governance is basically connecting your systems back into where the single source of truth is today, which is the PMS and CRS. What you're doing to expose your data is connecting it through these pipes that we're talking about today, through the model context protocol. But once the booking takes place, once an instant checkout is in place, and as Stripe had indicated, you can start getting these JavaScript web tokens, a credit card without seeing the card, then governance is going to kick in through those systems. The booking still goes back through those funnels. They're just not on a website and on a booking engine page anymore, but those funnels still exist.
And Greg, did you have something to add there?
Just going to always say, only say from a more legal perspective, when we talk about governance, it's just being responsible in your implementation and use of these tools enterprise wide. And there's a lot of things to point to, and frankly, we could spend the rest of the day talking about proper AI governance, but it's just being responsible and intentional in the way that you use these tools.
Okay, thank you. Okay, going to the next question from Jacob from the first panel. What is the real difference between MCP and direct API usage? Why would an organization like Wyndham need to use MCP over direct API integrations?
I'm happy to start with that, and then Harriet, maybe you can give a Mobi perspective. MCP was designed and led in partnership by Anthropic to create a standard that would allow the LLMs to understand your data a little better. So there's still APIs behind it. You're still connecting to existing APIs, but the MCP is a little bit more dynamic and easier to maintain than going API alone. But it doesn't mean as well that it has to be exclusive. So we're connected via MCP to Anthropic and soon OpenAI. Once our app goes live to Gemini or Google AI mode, we're connected via API. So it could vary.
Yeah, I think another important thing to understand is that APIs are structured, right? Like you know what input you're getting, you know what output you're going to get. MCP is actually a tool set definition. So you define a number of different tools, and then the LLM will decide which tools is appropriate to call based on the prompt that's coming in from the user. And so, and call those. And then as Mike says, that then in turn orchestrates a number of API requests behind the scenes of that. So it's just kind of a different, they're slightly different things, although in theory, as Mike said in the first panel, like they are USB connectors, right? You can abstract them to that. It's just they're kind of the difference between a USB-A and a USB-C, right?
I think they call them USB-C connectors because they're more universal, because it's a standard protocol. That's kind of the benefit of MCP, that it's actually a standard that explains how LLM brains read structured data.
Oh, Ira, you and I are going to have a knockdown fight about how bad USB-C is, man. Like it is a terrible. I wish they'd use almost anything else than that, but tomorrow's problem.
Okay, thank you. That was a really clear explanation. The next question I'm going to go to is commonly brought up. What hotels can actually do to best position their property for the opportunities AI provides? I know we touched on this throughout the sessions today, but maybe we can address specifically Rich's question was, what should a hotel revenue manager or hotel marketer do to best position their property?
I can start that because I've devoted a lot of time to this topic, and I have an online learning course on this, and I've done a lot of corporate training on the topic. There are basic principles they're not super complex, but the principles are different from traditional SEO strategy that you need to approach. And the reality right now is that first time in many years, it actually requires the entire commercial team to kind of come together. It's not just the marketing department. It's not just the distribution. It's not just the revenue management. It's everybody. And the strategy revolves essentially around kind of main pillars that are also related to traditional SEO approach, which is, first of all, which is critical, what do you have on your own website and how it's structured? You have to make sure that you're structured in schema format, that AI bots can read your data and expose the correct data and answer correctly to those infrequently used questions. And there's a whole kind of science around, which is again not complex, but the science around how you need to structure your data on the back end and schema, and then also on the front end. Second is how you're exposed outside of your own website. And this is related to having a Google business profile, being listed on Google Hotels, and being listed also on OTAs, whether we like it or not, and what your reviews are. And so all of this also adds to the trustworthiness of your business that AI really takes into account when selecting those hotels, whether to recommend them or not. But also once you get past through the filtering and become the recommendation, part of the recommendation process, the third stage is, are you actually bookable? And I see it all the time, especially if you're using agent mode and you're actually observing like agent mode within ChatGPT or Gemini, Auto Browse, Google product, you're following what AI is doing, and very often it tries to book from the direct website and it fails and it goes to an OTA. I see that all the time. So let's solve for that, please. Let's solve for discoverability and let's solve for bookability, but discoverability comes first because, again, OTAs are way ahead of hoteliers in that field.
Jason, you want to add there?
Yeah, I do. Because I have a little bit of a take on this one, which is that there's almost nothing you can do without help. If Wyndham didn't choose to build this alone, and none of the big companies are choosing to build this alone, almost everyone's subscale to take care of this problem on their own. So the challenge and the opportunity, if you're in revenue management or commercial, is to talk to like anyone else on this call. Talk to them too, talk to us. Like we all have slightly different opinions on how this is going to shake out, but you're not going to just change some things on your website and, take care of the problem. This is actually a fairly technical problem. This does require adopting new technology, like it or not. And I know no one got into hospitality to spec tech, but if you work with people who love hospitality, and every single person on this call is a hotel nerd who has booked a trip specifically to stay at a hotel, I count myself among that. I got into this through being a hotelier. Like, you should talk to people who actually also really like the tech, because you don't have to like it, but you are going to need to embrace it if you want to actually make a difference in this space, because this is not a simple just change some settings on your website thing.
If I could add, Nas, to that, if you don't mind, from a GM, a DOS, and revenue manager standpoint, we've been talking about these MCPs that can be loaded into these channels. We need to remember that as a team, if you're engaged in an enterprise version of AI at your property, you can use these same MCP links. I can use Wyndham's MCP link that they published on their website, and I can do reverse engineering. I can query that database and do comp set analysis. I can pull it into my Copilot 365 and bang on that information. And that's the opportunity nobody sees yet, is I can copy anyone's MCP URL and go do comp set analysis and pull it. Again, I'm being specific that you want to do this inside an enterprise version, so you're not disclosing private info. Well, I guess you're taking it, but it's a neat opportunity that nobody's getting into. We've been speaking with management companies as to how do the branded properties leverage these MCPs that are out there that the brands are doing. That's our vision. Go use the MCP they're putting out there and go ping against Wyndham and Marriott and Hilton and grab their data. They're putting it out there. Let's use it.
Everybody's watching Michael's face right now. All 200 people.
The good news is it's actually pretty easy to lock stuff down if you need to, but Harriet knows how to do all that, and Michael knows where she is, so I'll let those guys figure it out.
And she already has some controls there, so we're
yeah. So the only thing I'll add here, I think Jason's exactly right. I with all respect to Ira, I think you absolutely need to do what she's saying, no question. Like let me start there. On top of that, I think that MCP is sort of a way to get directly into the veins of the AI at the moment when it needs you, and at the moment when you need to show the best, most accurate prices and the best offers to consumers. So I don't think it's an either or. I think you want to do both of these things, and I suspect that there are people that are out there trying to help you hook these things up. Go talk to them, and as Jason says, let the nerds be nerds. But try to find somebody who's both a hotel and a technical nerd, and there's a bunch of them on the call here, and they will be your best friend.
Right. And I would say at the hotel level, just to add quickly to that, you need a person that is responsible for all the visibility, because as Sanjay was saying, there are lots of different pieces. There's technical, there's commercial pieces, but ultimately you need one person that's making sure that you're consistent across the internet, that your content is being rewritten, that you're trying to measure it to the best of ability. You need one person there that thinks about this. So that's a change as well for hotels.
And there
Okay,
was
love
also
it.
a question how independent hotels should approach it, because one story is Wyndham with a lot of resources. Another story is over 1 million independent operators. What do they do? And they probably have to work with aggregators because they're not going to be building their own MCP, but they're also in the position of more control over their own data because they control their own domain, and they're the ones who can publish all these infrequently asked answers to the infrequently asked questions that we are not seeing on the OTA websites. We're not yet seeing on branded websites because those are more of a cookie cutter type of listings, right? You have so much more leverage right now as an independent operator. Just use that. Learn about how to adapt, how to leverage that, and how to enrich your web presence and win once in very many years you actually have leverage over large companies in that space.
Can I
Okay,
make
great.
an
Yeah. Oh, go ahead,
unpopular
Brad.
comment about FAQs? I really have a hard stance on FAQs. Everyone's putting them on their websites. In our opinion, an FAQ is a band-aid for not having the right structured content in the first place.
It should
That's
be
the bigger
definitely both.
problem.
Structured
The
content comes
industry
first,
is
100%.
trying to solve structured data by doing
Well, yeah.
FAQs, and that's not the right model. The right model is marking up your hotel room with an offer. Focus on that, not an FAQ.
100%. Yeah.
Okay, jumping to the next question that's building on what we've been talking about. I run a branded hotel, and when I search for hotels using AI tools like ChatGPT or Claude, the recommendations seem to rely heavily on Google, Expedia, and review sites. What can hotel owners actually do to influence those results and make sure our properties appear in the top AI-generated recommendations? And they also added a note that their website is under brand.com.
We just essentially spoke about this. What I would also add is that different AI platforms have a different approach. Obviously, if you look at Perplexity, they're heavily leaning on TripAdvisor data because they have partnership with TripAdvisor and SelfBook. If you look at Google, obviously they're going to use their own Google ecosystem of data, which they have tons because they've been in our space for a long time. You look at OpenAI, it's a different approach. So first of all, it's not an umbrella solution for all, but there are basic principles that you can apply across all of these platforms in your discovery strategy that will help maximize your chances of being discoverable. And that's essentially what we just discussed to answer the previous question.
I think there's a subtly different answer here, Ira, and I'm going to try and build on
I love fighting with you in public.
I know. Naz is never going to have both of us in another meeting again. Look, I think that you could have asked this question 5 years ago about Google, and you would have come with almost the same complaint, and it's a legitimate complaint. I think one thing to understand is that the technology companies, whether they're Google or OpenAI or anybody else, their job is to make themselves successful and to make users delighted when they use that product. And so if you're going in and asking a question like hotels in Berlin, the reason that Expedia and Booking do so well is that they do a great job of answering that question. And it's very difficult for any individual hotel to be a good answer to that question. You are going to lose because you are not the universe of hotels. And so this is where I think that aggregators get a bad name. I think the right aggregator could be useful here by providing the right answer, which is a list of hotels, not an individual hotel, as an answer to a question that wants to have a list of hotels on the other side. So to the person that asked the question, I would sort of question whether you're asking for a recommendation in a city or your specific hotel. And those are two very different queries on the Google sort of universe. And I suspect that the AIs will treat it in a similarly sort of discontinuous way.
Consumers definitely need choice.
Okay. Well, I want
for
to
the branded property. I was going to answer another idea for the branded properties. There is an authoritative site out there every one of you have control over, and that is LinkedIn. And many of you that follow me on LinkedIn, you see my super long posts that are spammy. They're intended to be spammy because they're a direct fire hose to the AI surfaces. So we've been suggesting all of our hotels go use their own company hotel page to be broadcasting like you used to do with X and Twitter, where you can get a direct link picked up inside of an LLM through LinkedIn. Please post on LinkedIn for your hotel if you're branded. But branded.
And just FYI, my posts are intended for humans. So feel free to also follow me and read what if you are a human, then just follow me and read my posts too. Informative.
Okay, I wanted to go to Simon's question next on we've talked a lot about like suggestions, but how do you I guess how do you put together a measurement plan to measure the effectiveness of these strategies? Harriet, did you want to take this one? Okay.
Yeah, I can at least take part of it. I mean, I think from a tremendous opportunity here is we've talked about, well, what content do I need about my hotels? Well, with a good MCP solution, you actually get to see all of the logs that have come in, right? What is every single request that has come to you with some amount of context about, why that, request came in. And it's doing all of the analytics on top of that to understand where do you have content gaps, right? Like what content should you be generating? How should you be thinking about your ranking algorithms, et cetera, in order to promote the properties that you think will best meet the user's needs and ultimately convert. And so, like, partners that we have worked with have been just amazed that if you think about a lot of the click analytics that you might get off of your website and like what is it that the user is actually looking for, you can actually see like the conversational history of like what it is that they're asking for, and it completely gives you a new insight into what your travelers and potential guests actually want, and then you can start to action on top of that in terms of the content that you produce, et cetera, et cetera. It really is a flywheel that starts spinning, which is why it's so important to get going quickly, because you can start spinning that flywheel as quickly as possible.
Yeah,
sorry,
and regarding measurement, I think it's because as we talked about each of these AI LLMs, you capture information a little bit differently. What I talk about in the book here is that you have a series of prompts that are relevant to your hotel that don't necessarily use your domain name, and you run it over a series of weeks, and you can see trends in the data. While it isn't specifically deterministic, but it's probabilistic in ways to see whether you're showing up and where you're not showing up, where your competition is showing up. So that way you can go ahead and adjust your strategy to see where they're citing and to see if you can actually get mentioned there or what have you.
And I would just quickly add that it's important to understand we're in the beginning of this new transformation into the AI era, right? So with the traditional SEO, we have traditional metrics that we've all agreed on. Traffic and click-through rates are the key ones, right? And we all know how to count those and how to compare across and and look at our trends. We have not, in the AEO, we have not really agreed on the traditional metrics that we all gonna commonly use. So they're different. But what I strongly suggest is that if you are starting, as you should, starting your AEO strategy, you need to understand where you are right now so that you can understand how you grow. So look up, there's free tools that you can use right now to see where your visibility stands. And again, they measure different things, but at least you have a good idea of where you are right now so that you can start measuring your success going forward once you start implementing those strategies.
Jason, Andrew, do you have thoughts on this as well?
Yeah, but your hand was up first, Jason, so please go.
Andrew, I spoke already. You go first. I'll go second.
I was just going to say, real quick, looking farther down the funnel, you can also look to retail for some guidance on how successful these channels are. Stripe's already doing a lot of this with retail brands, and there's publicly available data like Walmart built an agentic commerce tool on its website and is seeing 35% increases in order average value through these agentic interfaces. And like Home Depot saw an 8% lift in conversion. So there's some hard end result numbers around conversion and bigger purchases that indicate that this is likely a worthwhile investment.
Conversion rates seem to be definitely higher from AI traffic.
Yeah.
Across the board, yeah.
I'd also say that you can try, making a prompt a couple weeks apart, see what's happening. That's kind of like looking at the results, but there are leading indicators. And remember, a prompt, especially if you're logged in, it's trying to answer what it thinks you want. So it's only one snapshot. And this gets back to saying this is a technical problem. When an agent visits your website, it tells you that it's visiting your website. You just need to know how to look. And Your Google Tag Manager and your Google GA4 is not going to capture that. They fundamentally read the web in a different way, and which agent and what it's doing is something that is passed at the server level. So if you know where to look and you have the right technology installed and find somebody to help you do this, you can see. And even a small hotel that we serve, 6,000 visits a month from different agents doing different things. And it presages certain things in terms of visibility. We can tell which pages they're reading. Um, there are different bots that do different things. Some are training the model that's going to talk about you when it comes out in 6 months. Some are a search tool that are helping the application get back to your website when it needs to find information about you. And so if you want to have a direct understanding of what's going on, it helps to look at the source. And it is something that's very different than tracking human traffic along your website. So you can invest in tools that will help you answer that.